Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to be thinking about how to be a little bit more creative with extended chords. So just to be entirely sure, let's just explain and recap on what we mean by an extended chord for those who are not quite sure what this is. If I'm in the key of C major, here's a scale of C major. And of course I can form my diatonic chords, the chords that belong to that key, simply by adding a third and a fifth above each note of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back to 1 again. So all of those basic diatonic triads have a root, a third, and a fifth. So what do I mean by extended chords? Well, we basically build chords in thirds, don't we? You know, if I take chord 1 in C major, we've got a root, a third, and a fifth. So if I want to extend that chord, all I need to do is to keep building thirds on top of it. So there's chord 1, a root, a third, a fifth. Let's extend it. A seventh, a ninth, an 11th, a 13th. And we don't need to go any further, because if I go to 15, I'm back on the same note where the chord started. So this is what we mean by extended chords. Okay, now a lot of people watching this will be already very happy about the notion of extended chords, but a lot of people are just unsure. Well, it's all very well saying I've got an extended chord, but how do I go about using these extended chords? And maybe some people have got as far as thinking I can cope with adding sevenths. So you might use a dominant seventh. So you might have a dominant seventh in the key of C, and then you can resolve it. That's all great. You might have got as far as using a supertonic seventh, a 2/7. And you might be able to go 2/7, 5/7, 1. Okay, that's great, because it's more exciting than going 2, 5, 1, that you can go 2/7, 5/7, 1. It just makes the chord a bit richer for being extended. We're going to have a look at a piece of music now. It's a Bill Evans piece, Time Remembered, in which he has really gone to town on extended chords. So you can just hear and see the impact of what these chords are and begin to think, gosh, you know, how can I start to think in more creative ways about using extended chords? Okay, so first of all, is this piece of music really in a key? Well, it's a bit debatable. It's certainly got key centers, but it's moving all over the place. So we're not really sitting in a kind of tonal hub, as it were, although it's not an atonal piece, but it's a piece that's very much about the color of extended chords. I'm going to play you a bit of this piece, and then we'll go through and see what these chords are and begin to get a feel for, well, how might I use an extended chord and put it alongside another chord, particularly if I'm not particularly trying to write in one single key. This is what these bars sound like. Time Remembered, Bill Evans. Okay, just gives you a flavour of that piece and gets us in the mood of what's going on here. So let's start combing through and seeing what's happened. Rather than trying to say this is chord 1 or chord 6 in a given key, this is just presented lead sheet style, because really every chord is a colour in its own right. And it's not particularly functional harmony in the conventional sense that, you know, we're going from 2/7 to 5/7 to 1 in a particular key. We've just got Bill Evans here just saying, here's a B minor 9 chord, it's followed by a C major 9 chord, and it's just a great colour. So let's see, he has this pickup thing where you've got this anacrusis, very interesting melodically as well. Like the first thing you hear is a tritone. So you hear that slightly stark tritone, which makes you think, ooh, which key are we in? And then the first chord that you hear is this. And it's a lovely warm B minor 9 chord. So are we happy about B minor? Well, B minor is B, D, F sharp. The 7th is A. The 9th is C sharp. And then you see how he spaces that chord. Quite a lot of wide spacings in the left hand, particularly as it goes lower. So you've got B down here. He doesn't want D there, so it's all thick and grumpy. He puts B there, puts the D a 10th higher. So you've got your root and your 3rd, and then you've got your 5th at the bottom of the right hand, and at the top of it you've got another 3rd in the middle, and then you've got this 9th sitting next to it. So C sharp, D next to each other. So part of this is what's the chord? The other part of it is what's the spacing of the chord. So you see that wide spacing in the left hand. Now let's look at progression, because where's he going next? He's moving on to this chord. It's a C major 9 chord with this added sharp 11. Ooh, what's going on here? Okay, well, what's a C major chord? We can cope with that. C, E, G. Well, the 7th is B, isn't it? The 9th is D. The sharp 11 chord, well, that's really the F sharp there. So you can see what's going on there. Okay. So just in case you're not entirely convinced by this notation, that sharp sign belongs to this C sharp there. So you see how that works. So we've got on this particular chord then, we've got C, the root of the chord at the bottom, and we've got E, the 3rd of the chord. So notice the progression, B minor 9, C major, the 10ths are progressing in the left hand. And then we've got the rest of this chord, which is rather interesting, above it in the right hand. So, and you see how you get this with the C sharp going to B as well there. So that's quite an interesting colourful chord. And then this G is just a note of the basic chord at the end of that bar, the end of that measure. There's a progression then, isn't there? If you're thinking in C major, it's going from 1 to 4/7, so there's a little hint of a progression there. But really what we're looking at here is an F major 7 chord. There's your F major 7. Bit easier to see, isn't it? Because F major is F, A, C. The E is the 7th. Notice his spacing. He's got the root and the 5th, and then the 3rd at the bottom of the right hand. That's a lovely spacing of a chord. If you do that, it's a very kind of thick, low, grumpy sound. Take the 3rd out of the middle of that triad, put it an octave higher, you get root, 5th, 3rd, and then he's got the 7th at the top, which is a lovely sound. And then when you go on to the second beat, you notice he's kind of embellishing the picture a bit by doing this. You see how that chord begins to build. You've got this F major 7, but then it kind of goes 9, 11, 13. You see how that progresses up that melodic line there. So the F major 7 gets richer. And then we're back to the B minor 9. So notice that's interesting, you know, we had the B minor 9 there, here it comes again. So there's sort of a sense of return to that. Much thinner texture this time. Even though it's a 9th chord, we've only got 3-part kind of writing going on here. But when you look at this collective picture, you've kind of got most of what you need there, don't you? to get your B minor 9 back. And then it becomes an E minor 9, even though it's a little bit thin in the spacing. When the left hand comes in with this, we get a clearer sense of that E minor 9, don't we? So E minor, E, G, B, D, and then F sharp. So we've got most of that going on. You notice though, when you're writing these extended chords, you don't have to have every single note of the chord in there. And sometimes, in fact, if you do, by the time you get to 11ths and 13ths, you've got a bit of a pile up of too many notes and too many clashes inside the chord. So you have to use your ear to thin things a little bit. Okay, it goes on to an A minor chord and starts off in 4 as a very simple A minor triad. That's all it is. And then you notice this B gets added to it. So it's kind of like, oh, what's that then? There's A minor, A, C, E, G is a 7th, B is a 9th. So he's kind of starting A minor, adding a 9th. Then we get D minor 11. Lovely sound that, isn't it? So there's D minor, D, F, A. Then we've got 7, 9, 11. That's how we end up with the C, the E and the G there. And notice again, spacing issues, how that goes there with this spacing of that chord. And after that, he then has quite a kind of crunchy chord that's much more tightly packed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 notes. We've previously on the second beat just had 3 notes. Now we've got 6, so varying the number of notes. And this is a G minor 9 with an added flat 5. So G minor is that, isn't it? G, B, flat, D. Well, we've got F for the 7th, you've got A for the 9th. And then if we flatten the 5, the D becomes D flat, which actually, in a way, is not actually written there, but it's implied. So you see how that goes. And then at the beginning of the next bar, the next measure, at the beginning of 5, one of the thickest chords to date, where you've actually got 8 parts going on here. E flat, major 9, with an addition in it. Well, E flat is E flat, G, B flat, then the D is the 7th, the F is the 9. Okay, we've also got A in there, haven't we? So there's a bit of an 11 as well. So there's a bit more to that chord really. Then you've got A flat major 9. Isn't that a lovely kind of move from here to this? And you can see how E flat, A flat, they're not far apart really, are they, in terms of chord relationship. But also here the drop from up here to down here. That's a rather beautiful bit of, improvisation or writing, isn't it? And the chord slightly thins out. We've got 5 parts after the previous 8 parts there. And there's an A flat major 9. Then he goes on to A minor again. Well, we've been here before. We've had an A minor back there, so some familiarity in it. Just notice that little sort of appoggiatura in the bass. It's rather nice, isn't it? Just adds something to it. And of course that B is sort of suggesting this 9th. And then other notes coming into the right hand, very kind of more plainly A minor. But then D minor 9. Gorgeous chord. We had a D minor 11 back here. Here's a D minor 9. So D, F, A, that's your D minor. C is the 7th. E is the 9th. And a bit of melodic movement with using a passing note and some harmony notes there. And then as we go into 7, G minor. But notice there's a bit sequential here, isn't it? We've got this appoggiatura in the bass that we had there. So he's doing that same thing again. Do you see that as the 9th of the G minor or as an appoggiatura onto the G? It's kind of both. The G minor then hangs about, and then this becomes a C minor 9. Because C minor, C, E flat, G, and then there's the 7th, there's the 9th. So that's what's happening there. And then a bit of decoration around that. He likes to have these semiquavers, these 16th notes. You notice how they kind of happen as a sort of little melodic tool to propel things along, often on the sort of 2nd or the 4th beats. Then we go to an F minor 11. Oh, these are all gorgeous chords, aren't they? You could live with these all day. F minor, what's this? F, A flat, C, E flat is the 7th, G is the 9th, B flat's the 11th. Back to an E minor 9. Okay, we've met this before. We've had E minor 9 up in this corner. Well, here it is, the sort of different organization of things. A few passing notes in there, moving on to the next bar where you suddenly have this rather beautiful E13 chord. Isn't that gorgeous, you know? Gorgeous stuff. So E, G sharp, B, the 7th, the 9th, the 11th, the 13th. It's kind of in first inversion, isn't it? Or an E13 / G sharp to be precise there. Gorgeous chord. Leaves you kind of sitting in the air for a moment, doesn't it? Not really a cadence, is it, in a conventional sense, but it has that sort of feel to it. Then after the tiniest rest, you just get B minor 7 arpeggiated. So you notice we talked about these 16th notes, these semiquaver figures. Well, here he is making a bit more of that in the second half of this bar, but no other harmony, just a sort of sweep up the arpeggiated chord, if you like. Onto E flat minor 11. So some of these 11th chords, and you're going to hear again his spacing using this 10th stuff in the left hand, but now propelling the music forwards with all these 16th notes, semiquavers, in the left hand. And then from there going to A minor 9. It's a totally different colour. E flat to A, well, what's that? It's a tritone movement, isn't it? So it's not very functional to go from E flat minor to A minor. It's the sort of thing you might find in Debussy or something, very impressionist kind of sound. But an A minor 9 chord. So A, C, E as the chord, 7, 9 is the B. And then we've got this added 13th kind of, added 11th rather, sort of creeping in. That, especially that if it's sharp. And then coming to the end of that bar, that's by arpeggiating up in the left hand again. Then a C minor 11, followed by an F sharp minor 9. Again, tritone relationship. C, F sharp, the same kind of trick, because this is harmonically kind of sequential with that, isn't it? So C minor 11, then F sharp minor 9. Sorry, that should be a G sharp in there. So you see what's going on with this. Beautiful bit of writing, isn't it? Deeply expressive, very emotional, time remembered, you know, it's a very evocative piece, isn't it? And you can hear and see how a lot of this harmony isn't particularly functional. It's kind of just saying, here's an extended chord, we're enjoying it for its own colour. Here's another extended chord, we're enjoying that for its own colour. They have a kind of life of their own. Sometimes there's a bit of a connection. Sometimes you're getting these tritone relationships. I mean, there's another one here between F and B, for example. So it's all part of it. And then that was built into the original pair of melodic notes at the beginning. So you're beginning to get some kind of feel for how you could be much more creative with extended chords in this kind of freewheeling style. So, okay, Bill Evans kind of like more in the jazz vein, but actually not completely disconnected from what the Impressionists were doing in this regard, which is quite interesting. So how does it all come together? And these are just the first 11 measures, the first 11 bars of this remarkable piece. You may well want to listen to the rest of it or find a score for the rest of it. But what I'm hoping this has done is to use this remarkable piece of music just as a means of opening up one's imagination to what can be done by getting a bit more creative, a bit more adventurous with these extended chords. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, let me invite you to take a little trip around the Music Matters website, www.mmcourses.co.uk. It's an Aladdin's cave full of wonderful resources for the musician. So you'll find courses there, you'll find information about our Maestros program, including the live streams. You'll find information about merch, all sorts of things going on there. But if you're really wanting to improve your ear with all this kind of stuff we've just been talking about, you might want to click onto courses and have a look at our oral dictation course, which is kind of starting with rhythms and single lines and then going on to 2-part, 3-part, 4-part, introducing more chromatic chords, extended chords and so on, developing the ability of the ear to hear things, to hear chords, to hear progressions, so that if you're wanting to compose or improvise, then you can kind of hear these sounds in your head and immediately know how they notate or how they transfer to real life under your fingers. So have a look at that and see if that's a course that might be useful for expanding your own musical horizons.